Welcome into Sportsmemo's betting podcast, NFL Every Game on the Board, with our first guest up, Robbie Vino. Robbie, welcome into the pod. How are you?
I am good tonight, Drew. How about yourself?
Doing good, man. Excited to get your opinions on the top half. Then we got minty bets coming in for the second half of the podcast. So first game up, 4-5-1, 4-5-2, Dallas at Detroit. Limited marketplace here, Robbie. What's going on? Any views on betting Dallas versus the Lions?
Yeah, well, I guess we just have to wait and see what the Matthew Stafford status is, right, Drew? He's so important to that team. Last week, they used Jeff Driscoll, and he didn't perform badly. Jeff Driscoll almost got Detroit into overtime in that contest against the Chicago Bears. So you have Detroit coming off a loss with a quarterback who's questionable here. We'll see what goes on the rest of the week. You have a Dallas team that's coming off a home loss to the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday night, a game in which they actually outgained Minnesota 443 to 364, still wound up losing. But I think, I'd almost prefer to have Stafford play here, Drew, because that would cheapen up the line for the Dallas Cowboys side, which I think is the right side here. With the running game is likely to get unleashed in this contest. Remember Sunday night, Minnesota basically came in with a defensive game plan that Ezekiel Elliott was not going to beat them, and the Dallas Cowboys couldn't run at all. 50 yards on 22 carries, 2.3 yards per rush. They had to resort to the passing game, which is not a bad thing. Randall Cobb went off. Michael Gallup had his. Amari Cooper had some sensational catches. So Dallas is so multifaceted offensively at this point that it'll be difficult for Detroit to stop them. Detroit had a freakish defensive outing last week against the Bears, a game in which they only allowed a little over 200 total yards. For the Lions, heading into that game, they were giving up 422 a game. So you can see that, I think that speaks more toward the Bears and their inabilities on offense than it does the Lions defensively. I would think that Dallas gets both aspects of the offense going here. I think if Stafford plays, you pay a cheaper price. If Stafford plays, I think you also look at the over in this game. Detroit, it's almost like the same situation as last year. They started off very good. Things looked promising. Remember, they had that big home win against the Patriots last year, and then all of a sudden it went south. It's starting to turn that way again due to injuries, obviously. But I could see Detroit, putting up theirs with Stafford at the helm. Dallas getting even more. I think Dallas is a good look if Stafford plays. I think Dallas and Detroit are a good look over the total.
Robbie, next game up, we got 4-5-3, 4-5-4, New Orleans at Tampa Bay. We do have a line on this one and every other game that we'll talk about here. 6 or 5.5. That's the Saints laying in Tampa, 50 being the total here, Robbie.
Yeah, and there's divisional game importance here, obviously. And you would look at it more from a Saints angle, Drew, because at this point in time, although not mathematically eliminated, Tampa's shot of making the playoffs is certainly dwindling by the day. The Saints are 1-1 in the NFC South. They're 7-2 overall, a couple games ahead of Carolina. So it's important that they win here, especially coming off of a divisional loss last week to the Atlanta Falcons. I would expect New Orleans to be fully focused. They had a very poor offensive outing last week. The loss threw them into the number 3 seed in the NFC. And, for New Orleans in the playoffs, Drew, home field is a big deal. New Orleans probably the most difficult venue to play in. Some might argue Green Bay in the NFC, but I think New Orleans is probably the most difficult place to play. They trail Green Bay and San Francisco at this point in time. So, again, this win here is big for the Saints. Last week, how about only 11 rushing attempts and 52 passing attempts out of the Saints play calling? Not very balanced, not the way we're used to them being, and especially with Alvin Kamara back. Alvin Kamara only ran the ball 4 times last week against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, some of it was due to the fact that they were chasing, but still, this week, you're going to go up against the number 1 run defense in the NFC, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They might have to air it out a little bit. The good news is we have one meeting already this year to go ahead and kind of gauge off of. And in that game, October 6th, the Saints win it 31-24. But I just want to point something out here real quick about Tampa Bay's offense, which is obviously the anchor to their team. The pass offense has been great. Ronald Jones lately has brought an added dimension to the running game. But in that first matchup, Tampa Bay couldn't run the football, 22 carries, 94 yards, and they couldn't throw the football, 15 of 27 for 158. If you go back and check into that game, Drew, you'll find out that Tampa Bay scored 14 points out of their 24, 7 of them off an interception return that got back to the 20-yard line, and from there, Jameis Winston threw a 26-yard touchdown pass after a penalty. And then they scored on the game's final drive. They went 78 yards in about 50 seconds, and Jameis Winston hit a 33-yard touchdown. So a couple of scores there that are, one obviously turnover-driven, the second one meaningless because it didn't help Tampa Bay cover at all. So perhaps the New Orleans defense has this Tampa Bay offense figured. Coaches like to fix what went wrong the first time. I don't know if Tampa Bay can fix it here. I think New Orleans minus the points probably the right side.
Good stuff, Robbie. On the first two games, we got third game up here. Atlanta at Carolina, staying in the same division here. Plus we got Atlanta. I believe that's where Colin Kaepernick is doing his workout on Saturday, though. Not sure if that has anything to do with too much to do with the Falcons more than any other team in the NFL. But either way, Robbie, back on the field, 49 being the total. Carolina laying 4 at home.
I went round and round with this game, Drew, and I'm still not at a definitive point here. But I'll say this. If you believe that what we saw last week out of the Atlanta Falcons is some sort of turnaround in their season, then you'll probably be on Atlanta in this game like the money. And you just check what's happened here with the betting public so far this week. Game open 7, it's pushed down to 4.5. There's nothing but Falcons money coming in wheelbarrows full for this game. And there's nothing but under money. 54 down to 49. Atlanta and under seem to be very, very popular choices here. Obviously, there's a lot of sharp money involved there to bring it down as far as it's been brought down this early in the week. That would signal to me that there's, somebody out there who really believes in what the Atlanta Falcons did defensively to the New Orleans Saints last week. I just don't know that I can get there. Is it a mirage, or is it something that Dan Quinn did during the bye week to get his team to get 6 sacks against the New Orleans Saints? I mean, this team had 7 sacks all season long, and they come up with 6 against Drew Brees. Kind of crazy what went on last week. The Falcons, Drew, they remain a frustrating offense. Even though they won that game last week, they kick 4 field goals, 26 of their points, 26 points total, 12 come on field goals, and field goals to where, they get pretty deep into New Orleans territory. They have to kick one. They get to the 13-yard line. They have to kick one. They get to the 19-yard line. They have to kick one. They get to the 20-yard line. They have to kick one. I think the farthest was a 43-yard field goal. So the fact that Atlanta doesn't produce touchdowns bothers me here. I think if you're just looking at simple keys and what might be difference makers in this game fundamentally on the field, I would start with the Carolina Panthers pass defense, which, first of all, leads the NFL in sacks of the quarterback. Matt Ryan's been banged around quite a bit this year. Carolina has 36 sacks to lead the entire NFL. Secondly, I'd say their pass defense overall, ranking number 11, as opposed to the Atlanta Falcons, which ranks number 30, is a big, big difference also. If the Panthers can keep their quarterback upright, which, again, you have to decide whether or not you think what Atlanta did last week is real and is going to be consistent for the remainder of the season. If you do, then don't follow this advice. But Carolina is very balanced on offense, and I don't know that they're going to get to Kyle Allen. San Francisco is the only team that made Kyle Allen uncomfortable this year because they took away Christian McCaffrey, and they had the pass rush to get after Kyle Allen. They buried him. Can Atlanta take Christian McCaffrey out of the game? I'm not sure. If you go off of last week and you do this, what if you took a comparison, Drew, and said, what, Alvin Kamara is the most like Christian McCaffrey in the NFL. And boy, Atlanta held Alvin Kamara to 74 total yards, rushing and receiving combined. But again, he only ran the ball 4 times for 24 yards. He caught 8 passes. I just don't know if that applies here. I think that it's a good spot to maybe step in here and play this thing up and over the total. I think Carolina is a team that has scored 27 or more in 5 of their 8 games. Atlanta's a team that's given up 27 or more in 5 of their 8. I think this thing probably adds up to an over here. I don't see a lot of reason to believe in what Atlanta did defensively last week.
Good breakdown there, Robbie, in terms of just the matchup standpoint on Atlanta coming out of the bye week. Great stuff, man. We got Jacksonville at Indianapolis up next, 43.5 being the total. This is a good one to shop around, guys, because we're seeing Indianapolis either 2 in the hook at home or -3 favorites. So that's a key number there in the NFL, but we got Jacksonville at Indianapolis, Robbie.
Yeah, it's a game where each team has a situational, Drew, that I really would like to bet. For Indianapolis, a team that's a division contender. In other words, a team, above average, contending for a division title, off of a home loss and coming back at home the next week. I usually bet that team. Indianapolis did lose to the Miami Dolphins. They come back this week. They play Jacksonville. It's a divisional game. I would like that for Indianapolis. However, I like the Jacksonville side too here, situationally. It's a desperation game for them. They're already in last place in that division, but not that far. Only 2 games out, but they're 1-2 inside the AFC South already. So this game means a lot to them. And in terms of preparation, remember, they've had 2 weeks to get ready for this. They come back off of the London game where they got humiliated by Houston, and the Colts have only had 1 week. If we get out of the situationals and into the fundamentals here, the Jacoby Brissett injury, who knows? Maybe he goes, maybe he doesn't. If he doesn't, you get Brian Hoyer. But the other side of the coin is we're done with the mustache. Gardner Minshew out, and Nick Foles is in at this point in time. And maybe the magic had run out, Drew, because that game in London, Minshew did not look good. And perhaps certain things were begun by other defensive coordinators to be figured out. We'll have to wait and see. But I feel like Nick Foles probably is in at the right time. He's had a couple of weeks to take reps with the first team, get ready for this. And at this point in time, you have to feel like Indianapolis is not that cohesive of a unit, especially on the offensive side. All their weapons, receiving-wise, have been taken away on the outside, right? No T.Y. Hilton, no Paris Campbell. Earlier this year, they lost Devin Funchess. We saw last week they only put up 12 points. It's hard to throw when you don't have any wide receivers to throw to. Now, the last 3 weeks, their defense has anchored them, and the defense has been good. Allowed 279 total yardage to Denver, 273 to Pittsburgh, 229 to Miami. All, middle to below average offenses in those cases, right? And not that Jacksonville is a great offense either. They probably rank right somewhere in there. But for me, if you're going to get points, and the amount of points that we're going to get here, I think in the vicinity of 4.5, something like that, I think you have to take them. It's a game where both sides want it. I think Jacksonville's healthier. I think Jacksonville's more desperate. I would probably grab the points here. Colts are already 2-0 inside the division. If they win, they get to 3-0. But I don't think they will. I think Jacksonville, especially plus the points, is probably the way to look.
Great breakdown, Robbie. Yeah, we are seeing 2.5s or 3, and you bring up the mustache, not playing, and it's Movember. Man, all this isn't working out for Gardner Minshew there, Robbie. I was rooting for him.
Yeah, that last game wasn't good. But he had done great things for them up until now. We'll see if they paid Foles a lot of money, right? It's time for him to go perform.
Yeah. Not that's heck. It probably is the better choice. We got Denver at Minnesota up next, Robbie. We got Minnesota laying 10 in the hook at home, 40 being the total here.
Yeah, the Broncos go with backup quarterback Brandon Allen out of Arkansas their last game, and they beat Cleveland 24-19. Then they get a bye week, so Allen gets an extra week to, get some reps in with the starters, and maybe they gain some familiarity with him. This is a tough ask to go on the road to Minnesota. That game against Cleveland, Drew, he had some help. They win 24-19, but he was helped by the fact that they were able to run the football. 127 yards rushing, 6.4 per carry. Cleveland not that great on run defense. Also, Brandon Allen, obviously a different type of quarterback to prepare for if you're a Cleveland than Joe Flacco was. They had no film on this kid who can run a lot of rollout-style passes. He can do things on the run that Flacco can't do. Maybe they caught Cleveland a little bit by surprise. But what's pretty alarming is Yeah, Denver wins the game. Yeah, they run a little bit on Cleveland, but they only had 40 total plays in the entire game, or excuse me, 43. Cleveland had 73 plays, minus 30 in total plays for the Broncos, minus 11 minutes in time of possession. If you need the running game to help Brandon Allen out, you probably won't get it here. Minnesota is extremely difficult to run against. We just talked about it, and we saw it last week. They shut down Ezekiel Elliott and that Cowboys offensive front, which opens up huge holes for him. The Denver offensive front is nothing like that. Philip Lindsay is nice, but he's not Ezekiel Elliott. And if that running game goes away, can Brandon Allen win this game with his arm? And I think that's what Minnesota is going to try and do. They're going to make Denver one-dimensional and see if, in fact, he can win the game with his receiving core led by Cortland Sutton, maybe Noah Fant, the tight end out of Iowa. I don't know if it's possible. You know, the preparation time may play into Denver's hands here. Like I say, they've had 2 weeks. Minnesota played Sunday night, so it's a little bit of a shorter week. They travel from Dallas back home. One key outside of the fundamentals and the 22 guys on the field at once would be Vic Fangio, the head coach of the Broncos, and he comes from Chicago. He game planned for Minnesota a few years there, and he knows that team pretty well. He game planned against Kirk Cousins and these guys last year twice. So perhaps Denver comes up with a real good defensive game plan. What it all leads me to is probably an under. Denver's been a great defense all season long, only allowing 309 yards per game. Minnesota, you know, it's one of those non-conference deals where you're a double-digit favorite and maybe you take the game for granted. So I think probably lower scoring, Drew, in this contest. 10's too much for me to lay, but I don't want to take it with Denver either because I think it could get away from them if they're unable to run the ball and maybe they turn it over because Allen's making mistakes. I don't want to trust him on the road. But I think under the total is a pretty safe place to go.
One more game on this segment, guys, and then we'll turn it over to Minty Bets for the back half of the NFL Every Game on the Board podcast. We got the podcast coupon code here, Vino500. That's VENO 500, Vino500 at checkout for his 1 year all-access package at Sportsmemo.com for $500 off. You'll get every play he releases in every sport. Sportsmemo.com. All the plays for just $1,499 for full 365-day access at Sportsmemo.com. Every play he releases in every sport for a full year. $500 off, good through Sunday night, using the coupon code VENO, that's VENO 500, VENO 500 at checkout for his 1 year all-access package with Robbie Vino. Last game up here, Robbie, for the segment. New York Jets at Washington here in our nation's capital. We got 2.5. That's what Washington, the Redskins, are laying at home. 38.5 the total here, Robbie.
Yeah, this game reminds me of that old game show, Drew, where like if you didn't know the answer, you could call somebody up and take a lifeline or something. I'd almost like to use you as a lifeline and let you analyze this game because it's so
you want to skip it?
Miserable of a game. I'll say very quickly about this one that Darius Geist does come back for Washington, which is a huge help because now you have a two-headed monster at running back with Adrian Peterson. We know that Sam Darnold went out this week and said the Jets can make the playoffs, which a little far-fetched, but we love his enthusiasm. The Jet run defense could be the difference here because Washington's assets right now are in the backfield. Poor Dwayne Haskins is hung out to dry with no offensive line and very little in the terms of receiving core. But I can't pick a winner. I can't trust the Jets here, Drew. I don't want to have the Redskins laying points here. The Redskins have only scored, I think, 6.5 points a game in their last 2 games on average. So it's, maybe you could look toward the under. The weather's going to be good. I checked that out to see if there would be a weather problem here. But, in the Mid-Atlantic, they're going to have about 40-degree weather for that contest. I won't play this game. I don't have anything really insightful to tell the viewers on this one because I can't find anything insightful to help myself make a bet. So I'm sure I can't do anything to help somebody else make a bet in this contest.
Fair enough, Robbie. That's good enough for me. And just quick question here, a little bonus section. One, I'll go back to the NFL. Two points here. The first point, though, that shirt, man, that Missouri shirt, the black and the gold here on the collar, that looks cool, man. Missouri's really doing something with their polos there. But we got the Gators in Missouri. I know you know a lot about the program there. I kind of like the Gators here, though, in a moderate price range. How do you feel about that Missouri-Florida game?
Yeah, I think so. And you know what, Drew? I liked the Gators last year in Gainesville, and Missouri destroyed them. They went down there and did a number on them. But you worry about, or you don't worry, but you wonder about the quarterback status for Mizzou because the drop-off from Kelly Bryant is enormous. You know, when Sean Robinson, the transfer from TCU, decided to take a red shirt this year at the beginning of the year, it left Missouri. He's very good, and he left Missouri with a real void as far as backup quarterback is concerned. They kind of survived it until Bryant got hurt, and now they're feeling the effects of it. He's going to be your starter next year in all likelihood, Robinson will. But we saw last week against Georgia. Now, Georgia's a brutal defense to go up against, but Missouri really couldn't move the football. So I think Florida's probably the right side. And real quick with the Mizzou shirt, I know earlier in the week I wore Belmont, and it wouldn't be fair to my youngest son if I didn't put Mizzou on to end the week. So I got to be fair to both boys here.
I got you, Robbie. And the whole Robinson playing quarterback thing, couldn't he still play in this game and get his red shirt with the new rules, or no? Is that out of the question?
Yeah, you know, it happened right away to start the season where they just said, nope, we're not going to play you at all this year. It was a mutual decision. Coach Odom, the player, just get ready for next year. We're not going to use you. So they've gone with a couple of freshmen we saw last week, one with a little bit of promise, the third teamer. But I don't know that you're going to show that promise against this Florida defense, against this Florida pass rush. Florida's got something to play for here. Like I say, Mizzou went down there and just destroyed this team last year. And it's still possible, Drew, that Kelly Bryant could play in this game. I mean, he was close to playing last week against Georgia. It wasn't until the morning of the game where they announced that he probably wasn't going to go.
But is there any reason for them to rush him back? Meaning, like, bowl considerate, they can't win the East. Like, other than this just singled out game, there's no real reason, right?
Right, and especially because their appeal has not yet been granted. You know, they're on probation anyway. As of right now, they can't play in a bowl game as it is. They couldn't play in a bowl game to start the season. They knew that. These guys like Kelly Bryant and Sean Robinson had the option to transfer out way back in the spring. And Coach Odom was going to let anybody out of their commitment, but they all stayed. They thought that once they made the appeal this summer, it would be answered quickly and they would get an affirmative because the school did so much on their own, investigation-wise, to help the NCAA out. They turned themselves in. They showed them all the problems. And the NCAA just hasn't rewarded them with anything here except no answer and probably no bowl. So you're right. That's a long summary to say, no, there's not a lot to play for here except that they're at home in front of the home crowd and maybe the fans want to see one more good game. It's a devoted fan base. But boy, oh boy, I don't know. And that's a tough game against Florida this week. So I would be with you. I would be on the Florida side. Even if Bryant plays, I think I'm on the Florida side.
And Robbie, real quick, just because we're running up against it time-wise, but you brought up the weather in the Mid-Atlantic with the Washington game. Anything you want to throw out there weather-wise for the bettors going into this weekend, both NFL and college football?
You know what? Anything I'm going to be involved in, Drew, and for the majority of the country, we're not going to see bad weather. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, the Pacific Northwest, where some of those Pac-12 games are being played, and generally this time of year we see those rainy games in Corvallis or Eugene. Not going to see it this weekend. Won't see bad weather on the East Coast. It's colder now than it will be on Sunday for the East and Mid-Atlantic, so I think we're good. There's a couple of situations maybe in the Midwest. I think Iowa State might be a situation. But other than that, not too bad this weekend.
Okay, so possibly Ames, Iowa for one to look out for and circle watch there. Robbie, great stuff as always, man. We'll bring Minty in here, guys, in just a second for the back half of the NFL Every Game on the Board podcast. Check out Robbie Vino's work at sportsmemo.com, and you can take $500 off of his 1 year all-access package, every play in every sport for the next 365 days. $500 off with the coupon code VINO500. That's VENO 500. VINO500 at checkout. Guys, best of luck with your bets. We'll be right back for the second half of the NFL Every Game on the Board podcast.